Good morning and welcome to Data Talks Live with Dr. Tom. I'm Dr. Tom, and today we're going to talk about data. So let's get right into it. So I was reading this morning this article put out by Google's developers blog, introducing the Data Commons Model Context Protocol Server, streamlining public data access for AI developers. And this is by Keyur Shah, software engineer, and they're excited to announce the public release of the Data Commons Model Context Protocol. Marks a major milestone in the making of all data commons. Vast interconnected public data sets instantly accessible and actionable for AI developers, data scientists, and organizations worldwide. This capability further supports the larger ambition of data commons, using real-world statistical information as an anchor to help reduce large language model hallucinations. That's a good thing. So I was reading it, and I think the goal of reducing hallucinations by ensuring that LLM's claims as statistic or fact can be grounded in trusted public data. The article describes use cases, for instance, from the One campaign to show how users can ask things like, what health data do you have for Africa? Or request comparisons across countries. It's positioned as lowering the barrier for developers or agents to integrate data without wrestling with multiple API formats. So a recurring complaint about AI and data work is that much of the time is spent on integration, cleaning, mapping, combining sources, and handling edge cases rather than thinking. So I think from a data plumbing perspective, this MCP approach could be a good thing. It could be an example of infrastructure built so that others don't have to build it again. And that kind of layer is what often decides whether a data project succeeds or fails, because as many of us know, data cleaning is by far the thing that we spend the majority of our time on. If many agents rely on a single server or protocol, what happens if it has an error or a bias or downtime? And what about versioning, updates, or governance? There's always a trade-off between easy integration and distributed control. And then hallucination mitigation is a big deal. That could be a competitive tool. It's interesting to me that Google frames this as a part of reducing hallucinations. You could question, is it enough? How well does the MCP server handle conflicting or outdated data? And what about edge cases where public data is weak or missing, which happens a lot with public data? I've worked with much of it, and it's often weak and has a lot of missing data. And one other thing is this is about public data sets, but there are many powerful use cases in business, healthcare, finance, which depend on proprietary data. So will Google or other providers do analogous work for private dark stacks, or will that remain in the hands of enterprise? My sense is, at least for now, enterprise is the way. The article mentioned it's for developers, agents, and organizations, but could this also lower the bar for domain experts and non-coders to ask complex data queries in natural language? If so, that could change who gets to use the data, which could be a good thing. But what's missing? How are updates handled? How are disagreements or data uncertainties handled? Governance and adaptability or provenance controls exist? How is it going to do with performance and scalability under heavy use, if anybody's equipped to do that? I think Google is. And how universal is the coverage of public data sets going to be? Is this something you're going to have to opt into? Municipalities are going to have to say, we're going to provide you our data. How's that going to work with things like data.gov, for example? If you were building an AI agent for your domain, let's say in business or health or politics, how useful would access to a unified public data interface be for you? Post a comment. Maybe what kinds of errors or surprises do you think these agents might run into? For example, conflicting data, missing data, misrepresentation. Is this kind of infrastructure a public good, or is it something that should be commercialized? And how much should we trust public data as a grounding base for generative systems? And what happens when public data is flawed, as I think we know it often is? Good questions. If you have thoughts on those, please post them in the chat and I will answer them if I can, or comment on them. So another article I was reading today was in Forbes. It's How AI Recalibrated the Value of Data by Adrian Brightwater. Data has value, yet there is no international standard rate of exchange for data. There is no formalized system of currency that denotes how much an organization should pay for a bushel, barrel, quart, pinch, or baker's dozen of datum when aggregated. Despite this unerring truth, technology vendors are so fond about talking to how well their platform enables businesses to work with information that they are almost incapable of saying the word data out loud unless it is followed by the word value. So this is interesting. I think with generative AI and advanced models, data is no longer just the raw input. It's the quality, the structure, the context, and the responsiveness. I think AI is raising the bar. Messy, siloed, uncurated data is less tolerable. Organizations that had large troves of data but poor data hygiene are probably having to rethink this value proposition. Value of data really now includes the concept of readiness for AI, the speed, adaptability, the metadata, the context. And there's a shift in which types of data gain value. Is it first-party data, cleaned data, real-time data, enriched or derived data? Also, because AI models can extract and repurpose data in new ways, there's a reevaluation of data assets. In the old paradigm, I think having more data was often seen as better. Bigger data sets, more sources, but with AI, the differentiator I think now is becoming how AI ready is the data. Is it annotated? Is it cleaned? Is it normalized? Is it semantically consistent? Is it contextually rich? I think quality is starting to trump quality in many contexts. But data is still an ongoing asset, and it's not a one-time collection. Once your data is being used by AI, it becomes dynamic. You constantly need feedback loops, error corrections, augmentation, versioning, and the value of your data is increasingly tied to how well you maintain and evolve that data. Organizations that invest in data infrastructure, pipelines, metadata layers, governance, I think are building long-term moats where AI amplifies advantage when the underlying data is good. And there's a clear contrast between AI projects built on weak data and modest AI with a strong data foundation, which I think wins because, garbage in, garbage out. Just because AI can squeeze insights from data doesn't always mean it should. Poor data bias, hallucination inferences if the data layer is undervalued or neglected, downstream AI outputs could be risky. And there's also this idea of data debt, accumulating a messy data collection and then trying to retroactively fix it. I've seen a lot of organizations do this, and most of the time it doesn't turn out well. As AI uses recombined data, the ownership, consent, usage boundaries, and privacy constraints become sensitive. Data that was once harmless might now require new uses or abuses. And how should organizations account for changing regulatory, if any, or ethical value of data? A lot of this reevaluation is happening inside enterprises, which means there's not really any public accountability, but AI's progress leverages public web data, synthetic data, transfer learning, and the balance between using internal data and augmenting it with external is shifting. So, which data categories are becoming more valuable? Is it real-time streaming, sensor data, Internet of Things, telemetry, metadata, and which will lose value? Is that stale archives, low fidelity logs? Give me an example from your industry and post it in the chat. I'd be interested to know. Some other questions might be, has your organization had to change how it collects or maintains data because of AI expectations? And if your data were wrong or noisy, how vulnerable are your AI models and insights? And what kind of data investments do you wish you had made earlier on cleaning, governance, or pipelines? And do you believe some organizations are overhyping data's value because they see AI success stories? Is there a bubble or an overvaluation? I think these are important questions to ask. Okay, the last article I was reading was from Aetna Health, and its data exchange with EMS improves patient care. So patient outcome data is flowing between 4,000 first responders and medical providers in Utah's Wasatch Front region through the new ESO Health Data Exchange platform. I had this idea 4 years ago and did nothing with it. Well, Common Spirit Health, which is a major health system, is implementing real-time data exchanges between its hospitals and emergency medical systems and services in Utah. So I think, as an aside, we talk about, in my field, data interoperability. So essentially what that means is your data siloed, right? So if you, let's say, go to 3 different healthcare providers, and each one of those healthcare providers has their own proprietary information management system, those systems don't talk to each other. So your providers don't necessarily have a holistic view of your conditions and your care unless you give them that view. So you have to fax copies of your medical records or hand deliver them or give permission for them to transmit those records. And it's not like if you have providers that are operating in disparate systems that the providers are going to have access to your data. That's a weakness of our system in the US. In many countries where they have centralized healthcare services, the data associated with an individual's care is also centralized. So the provider has a kind of a singular and holistic view of the conditions and medications that an individual is taking. And I think from the perspective of having holistic care, that approach is far superior. So that, I think, makes this data exchange a good thing. The aim is to improve coordination, better outcomes, closing the feedback loop. In cardiac care, for example, Common Spirit has used tools like Pulsara in other regions to reduce times from EMS to contact to artery reopening. One chronic issue in EMS and emergency care has been once EMS delivers the patient, the EMS team often don't learn what ultimately happened. That's a huge missed learning opportunity, and this project addresses that directly by giving EMS visibility into the outcomes, which can refine their decision-making and training. I think something like this would be great in kind of healthcare in the US overall, if we could have a US-wide healthcare data exchange that major hospital systems could plug into so that everyone was sharing everybody's data in a private and HIPAA compliant way. I think that would be a game changer, because as AI models or decision systems get introduced into EMS and hospital workflows, having robust, real-time, bidirectional data exchanges is going to become prerequisite. Once exchanges like this are in place, you could layer predictive models like risk stratification in field, pre-hospital alerts more confidently. So just something to think about, future directions for healthcare data exchanges. I think that's all I have for today. So thanks for joining us. This has been Data Talks with Dr. Tom. I'm Dr. Tom. Until next time, take it easy.